Due to the nature of our client acquisition, relying massively on LinkedIn, 80% of the meetings we booked actually come from LinkedIn.
We've been seeing a lot of AI generated, not only content, but also comments. Is this something that you see that might go to worst in the upcoming months?
I think it's doomed to happen, right? It's now everyone knows how to prompt LLM. LLMs are getting better and better. So producing content is becoming like very commoditized, like everyone can do it. A way to differentiate yourself from all that noise, I think, is just to be as tactical as possible in your content. What people are gonna start caring even more is just like the very tactical stories, like sharing real numbers, sharing real learnings by actually doing the thing.
When you are an agency, the amount of value that you provide, normally it's quite related to the amount of time that you invest in this client, unless you have a standardized product. So it's not as scalable as SaaS. What tools or what processes are you doing internally with AI in order to guarantee that you can scale?
The whole SaaS, software as a service, I think is going to start to be flipped, and we're going to go into a world is going to be more like service as a software. And so you're going to start seeing a lot of agencies building a lot of tech internally to be able to serve more clients and serve clients even better with less headcount.
Welcome back one more time to the Agentic Project. Today we have Alex, CEO at Cold IQ. Alex, jumping straight into the podcast. You guys are running a 7 million sales agency. My first question is, when you started a few years ago, when you were scaling from 0 ARR to 1 million until now, what has changed?
Yeah, great question. I think typically when you start a business, I think for most of my friends that are also like entrepreneurs, most people do it for freedom. Like at the beginning, usually you have a bad experience in your 20s, have a boss above you that you cannot stand anymore. And then you're just like, I want to be the one deciding for myself. And so that's usually a quest for freedom that makes you start a business. And I think now, 3 years later, managing a business with more than 30 people, it's more an idea of figuring out by yourself how far you can take it. Now, we don't really do it for the money. I think it's still very enjoyable to have all the freedom that a business can bring. But now it's more about, okay, let's try to take that thing as far as we can and let's just play the game of business, which is, I think, the game to play.
And toughest also.
Also the toughest, yeah, but the most rewarding, I would say.
So Alex, I came up with a no introduction because I don't think you need one, at least in LinkedIn, for the people that we're going to be sharing this with. Pretty sure they all follow you. You have a big following in LinkedIn. It's around almost 60,000 followers. And now you're also crushing it on YouTube. We wanted to on this podcast, we're actually going to be discussing about this AI sales playbook, this outbound playbook that you guys are building, that you guys are actually crushing, and also try to battle test it a little bit, because we see there are a lot of AI sales tools, and a lot of people is doing now like sales, like outbound with AI tools. And it's not everything as fancy and as easy as it seems, like shooting these messages, emails, DMs, and so on. So we want to dig a little deeper into this. Alex, Cold IQ started 2 years ago, and you started doing sales
it's more than
as an
2 years
agency.
ago.
And
Yeah,
what has
around
changed?
like 3 years ago.
What were you doing then that you're doing now differently?
Yeah, so the way I got into Cold IQ is actually Michelle, my business partner, that started Cold IQ with the idea to make it an affiliate platform. So back in our early 20s, we were like making some side income with online betting, and we had discovered like a nice way to make money through affiliates. And so in 2022, Mish decided to give it another shot, and this time not with online betting, but with sales software, because at that time he was actually working in sales for a small startup in Belgium, and thought that if we could have made it work for online betting, why not trying it for sales software? So he decided to create a tool directory listing like all the best sales software out there. And then what ended up happening was that with the SEO traffic that the website was getting, I started receiving some requests from companies that actually needed help with the implementation of those software. And so at the time when he had, I think, 3 or 4 clients, at the time I was working for WorldCoin, which is the crypto company of Sam Altman. I used to work in operations for a lot of different startups in Germany. And at the time I was a bit done with the employee life. I had a really bad experience with an old manager, and I was like, I was 27 at that time. I was like, never again. I want to work for someone else. And then ChatGPT had just released, was like, I think GPT-3 at the time. And I knew that this would be society impacting as a technology. And I knew I wanted to do something around this. And then naturally, me and Mish started working together and started to sell outbound services to more and more companies. And so what started as an outbound agency now became like a bigger business. Now we're also helping companies with ABM strategies. We're like running LinkedIn ads for them. We're also doing some thought leadership on LinkedIn because a lot of people know us for LinkedIn content. So we're actually also offering ghostwriting services to other companies. And now the big goal for us entering into 2026 is that we want to reposition Cold IQ and move away from just being seen as an outbound agency to being seen more as a full cycle GTM agency. And so now our new flagship offer is going to be what we call the GTM Flywheel, being a mix of outbound, ABM, and content, because that's how we believe you can get the best results to grow your revenue in 2026.
So how does this flywheel look like more in detail? You went a little bit high level. Why don't you give us a little more specifics of what are the parts that make this flywheel?
Yeah, so that's usually the question you get asked a lot when you work in outbound and cold email. Is everyone is asking you, is cold email dying? Can we still get results? So my general answer to this is that cold email is going to start working less and less if you use it in a silo. And I think how you can get the best results with cold email is actually making it compound with other lead gen methods. And so here, to answer on a very tactical way, for us, the best campaign we run are always what we call inbound-led outbound campaigns. And so it's actually leveraging some sort of intent that we get from people engaging with our content, people visiting our website. That's usually gets you much better results targeting those people rather than going pure cold and just targeting a list of like 10,000 prospects you might have scraped from LinkedIn. And that's what we mean with the GTM flywheel is like same with ads. One thing that we do a lot, I don't know if you've ever heard about the tool Fibler. And so what Fibler allows you to do is that you can pre-warm a list of prospects, you show them some ads, and then you can only trigger a cold email only once that prospect has seen your ads 2 to 3 times. And so you actually warm up prospects with some ads, and you can do the same with content, right? Like by posting a lot of content on LinkedIn, it's the same idea. If people have been views to see you like delivering value on a specific topic, once you decide to reach out to them, you don't reach out completely cold, but they've already some sort of idea of what you provide and who you are.
One question here. So in the end, in order to do this follow-up action, you should have captured some way the email or profile of this person, no? So are we talking about like a person has already submitted a form or has already provided you the details, or how does it work?
No, so you can actually use different tools. I would probably name three. We probably can do it with Phantom Buster, Trigify, and Teamfluence. And what those tools would allow you to do is that you can actually scrape all the people that have engaged with your post, people that have liked, people that have commented, people that have reshared, people that have also visited your LinkedIn profile. And then what you're going to do is that you're going to push that data to a Clay table, and then you're going to run a series of enrichment inside of Clay directly. So you don't need to get the email from the person directly. What you can do is just pushing all the data, getting the LinkedIn profile of the person that has either visited your website, engaged with your content, and then starting to run a series of enrichment inside of Clay to then find a lot of different data points and also find their phone numbers and or email addresses.
So in the end, so this social media part is super important, no? Because if you don't earn, if this touch point doesn't happen on LinkedIn, it's highly unlikely that you can reach this person.
I don't think it's impossible, but it makes it like much easier. We see it the same with us. Like sometimes we run some campaigns, and when the emails are being sent in my name or in the name of Michel, we get a much higher positive reply rates than if it was like a new person that just joined Cold IQ. So I think if you reach out to people that have seen consistently your content over the last few months, they're gonna treat you very differently. It's the same for you guys, right? Imagine if you tomorrow you receive an email from Alex Hormozy offering you to sell you something, you're gonna treat that email completely differently than receiving an email from someone super random.
So in this sense, your ICP has their ICP on LinkedIn. If not, this flywheel is exclusively for someone who is gonna be spending time on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, and so that's also what we want to do with the GTM flywheel is like being very focused on GTM tech, because that's also something we realized in 2025. Like Cold IQ has always been an agency that was servicing everyone. Like we didn't have a specific niche, which is very uncommon for an agency, right? It's like when you look at typical agencies, they have like really one vertical, one very specific ICP. And for us, it's due to the nature of our client acquisition, relying massively on LinkedIn. 80% of the meetings we booked actually come from LinkedIn. We never really had a specific ICP or niche, and we are planning to change that in 2026 because we also realize that actually the clients we can serve the best are typically VC-backed GTM companies. So if one of our best clients, Aerops, for who we can like deliver a lot of value by delivering those three pillars, right? Outbound, ABM, and content. Because to your point, Nacho, it's true that if you go in like more old school industries, like sometimes the ICP of those companies is actually not hanging out on LinkedIn. So the whole like LinkedIn content play, inbound led outbound doesn't really work. So I take an example always with my parents. They have a marzipan factory in Belgium, very random, but they sell to B2B companies around Europe. And for them, for example, the whole posting content on LinkedIn, it doesn't really matter. It's not how like industrial company is gonna buy from another company. And so for them, it's much more going to trade shows, like meeting people in person. And so it's also very niche specific. Like in SaaS, when you're like in the like GTM SaaS VC backed, all the founders are on LinkedIn. People are very used to scroll LinkedIn a lot. So that's where you can really get that compounding effect from the three different lead gen channels that might not apply if you work for another type of industry.
Yeah, there you go. You actually have to go for a half of you. In a way, you have an ACP, not very specific, but like you need to be selling to those people that actually spend time there. We are actually now starting a little product that we're gonna be selling also to a more traditional niche, which is around credit brokers and so on. And I'm doing these, like finding these leads, and they're never, you always see profiles with this person hasn't shared anything here. So it's like, okay, me creating content for them here might not make sense. We're going to have to find a way around this. And I feel like it's what you're saying, no? You do have that ICP, maybe not like a clear department or a clear department, yes, but not a clear vertical. But those B2B SaaS that spend time on LinkedIn, it's also in some way like a vertical itself, not the most narrow one. But you're like letting aside a bunch of other traditional verticals that you know that they're not for you, and therefore you don't have to go look after them. In this sense, something that concerns, I've been active posting on LinkedIn for 2-3 years. And in the past year, we've been seeing, and you're definitely also seeing a lot of AI generated, not only content, but also comments that are this LinkedIn feed, at least my LinkedIn feed, into something with a lot of noise and hard for me to spot the good content. I do have the creators that I know that they usually post good stuff and I stop and read. You're one of them, of course, but there's a bunch of noise, and even some of these creators, 2 out of the 4 posts that they post per week are also a bit like noisy. Is this something that you see that might go to worst in the upcoming months? Or like, what is your kind of light at the end of the tunnel that keeps you wanting to stay in the same space?
I think it's doomed to happen, right? It's now everyone knows how to prompt LLM. Like I think the LLMs are getting better and better to actually generate. And so producing content is becoming like very commoditized. Like everyone can do it. If you look maybe like 3-4 years back, it was actually taking a lot of work and time commitments to actually post consistently on LinkedIn. Now you can create a cloud project, feed it some like viral post, viral hook, dictating something is just gonna create already a very nice looking post. A way to differentiate yourself from all that noise, I think, is just to be as tactical as possible in your content. If you can talk about experience and about things you have done, that's the type of content that people usually find interesting. Like now information is becoming like less and less valuable. Me telling you like the 5 important things in sales, like everyone can go on ChatGPT and like type this and get the answer. And I think now what people are gonna start caring even more is just like the very tactical stories, like sharing real numbers, sharing real experience, like real learnings that you have learned by actually doing the thing. And that's going to be very easy to separate people that are actually doing things and people are just like prompting LLM to generate content.
That's actually, I super agree with this. Also, I've been biased to post. I do post, and we see a lot of posts that are like personal experience and so on. But sometimes when you go, and a lot of content creators, I feel like a lot of content creators and even founders, when they go and post, you try to think, what value are you adding or what value are you trying to give every post? That should be the first fundamental when trying to post. And sometimes you want to share, as you were just mentioning, you want to share something that you've learned, these 5 sales things that work or that at least work for me, and it's something that you could perfectly go and ask ChatGPT. On the other end, if I explain some personal experience, I might have the feeling of, does people really care about this? Is this actually adding value to whoever is reading this? Do you ever have that like imposter syndrome or something, and how do you like battle that?
I think a way to reduce that feeling is that you should always remind yourself that if it helps one person, I think it was already like worthy enough to post the content. Like sometimes when you like try to convince people to start posting on social media, they're like, oh, nobody care, no one is gonna care what I have to say. But at the end of the day, there is for sure at least one person that could benefit from what you're saying. Sometimes you might think that in business there is like guys like Alex Hormozy that has already said everything, but the thing that people tend to forget is that you learn better from people that are like one step ahead of you rather than like from someone that's 100 steps ahead of you. Like a guy like Alex Hormozy is super successful in business. Like it's going to be very difficult to relate to him if you just started your business and you make 5 to 10K per month. And so by making 5K, it's probably going to be much easier to learn from someone that makes 50K rather than learning from someone that makes like half a billion per year. And so sometimes you also need to reduce a bit that imposter syndrome that, yeah, for sure, there are like people more successful than you sharing contents. But then there's probably a lot of people that are like just 1 or 2 steps behind you that would actually benefit much more from your content than from like those really massive business creators.
Yeah, agreed. And jumping a little bit into cold IQ, because something that fascinates us, and you post a lot about the flywheel that you speak about and the AI tools that you guys are using in every step of the flywheel and so on. But when it comes to adding or to giving to your client in order for them to pay you enough to be making 7 million every year, what do you give them? Is it that you give them this, okay, you're going to be doing this? Is it like a consultancy where you give them, yes, you should do this and that and post all of this? Are you actually like their right hand, helping them to post every week, their founders, and helping them with the strategy, not only with strategy but also with the content? What is the value that you're giving that it turns into the ARR that you're currently having?
No, clients are actually paying us for the execution. And so that's the whole thing with the content strategy is that we teach people for free and we share the valuable content for free and then we charge for implementation. So we don't gatekeep anything. For sure, we're going to have some internal processes that we might not want every agency to reuse, but in terms of knowledge, we try to be as open as possible, sharing as much valuable content on the different platforms. And then where we make the money is actually by implementing those systems for companies. And so if a company is saying a system that brought us to 7 million a year, and we explain like the sales process, we explain the tools, we explain like our GTM strategy, then it's going to be very interesting for companies to be like, oh, I would actually want Call Like You to implement this for me. And that's how we make the money. So we do a little bit of consulting, but I would say 90% of our clients, it's actually a done for you service. So we take care of everything. So if you look at the outbound part of the business, that's going to start by drafting an ICP matrix, understanding who's the ICP that the client is selling to, doing the list building, doing the data enrichment, doing the copywriting, and then doing the outreach. So we really execute. We don't only teach clients, but we also execute. What we might do for like bigger companies is that typically we would do a done for you for 6 months that would then transition into a done with you model. Because for like big companies, you also need to keep in mind that for them, they don't want to rely forever on an external agency. And so what a lot of them are usually interested is show it to us that it can work. And then after 6 months, just train my team so they can take it over. And so that's also another type of contract that we have done like very often with bigger companies.
In this last type of contract, in the end, it's not good for you long-term speaking, because at some point the client will stop paying you. Like, how do you handle this?
Yeah, so typically you can find a new form of engagement at the end of a 6 months contract. So imagine if you were to do a 6 months done for you, where you're like building everything, then you would have typically a 3 months transition where you're gonna start training the internal team to take over from us. And then typically what we do is keep like a smaller retainer for consulting, keeping like all the systems up to date. And then what we also typically do is that we manage the email infrastructure for the clients. And so that's typically a massive headache for big companies. It's changing all the time. To like, how many mailboxes per domain? Should I buy Google? Should I buy Microsoft? It's almost a full-time job, right? To keep up with everything happening around email infrastructure. And so typically we go towards more like a smaller retainer with 1 to sometimes 4 hours of consulting per month, having still direct access to us and helping them to maintain all the systems and the email infrastructure. So for us, it's better to do like a big done with you contract over 6 months, keep a smaller retainer, and then move on to another client. I think the market is so massive that we don't really see it as an issue that sometimes you just keep a client for 6 months, because when you think about it, pretty much any B2B company in the world needs what we do. Most companies, like I would say, even like every company needs to make more money. And so I always explain that to people that as a B2B service provider, you can help do three things, right? You can help a company save money, save time, or make more money. And I think out of the three, the easiest to sell is actually going to pitch a company that you're going to make them more money. And so even if a company can learn a lot from us for 6 months and then we move on to another one, the market is so enormous that it's fine for us. And you also see it by the amount of GTM agencies, clay agencies that have popped up in the market over the last 2 years, is that the market is so enormous that there is room for like multiple players.
Are the results there though, in terms of, because for you it's pretty obvious because you've kept growing for 2 years, but are your clients and in general the clients of these agencies getting the results they expect that justify what they pay for these agencies?
No, I think a lot of clients are getting burned, right? That's the issue. When something is so new, it's very difficult for companies to figure out which agency to work with. And so for us, it's also very common that we're usually the second or the third agency to work with that have had like bad experience before. They paid like a 3 months retainer for zero results. One thing I would say though is that Outbound is not a viable channel for every single B2B company in the world. It's like typically for us, we only want to work with companies that have already found product market fit. And so that's a mistake that we did at the beginning. I can also be super honest. When you start an agency, you want to sign every client possible. Every time someone is like, hey, I'm ready to pay a 3, 4, 5K retainer, when you're just starting, you say yes to this because you just want to make more revenue. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of agencies are making. And we did that the same at the beginning, is signing the wrong type of clients. And so here, like I can go in more details, but usually the biggest factor that you should need to take into consideration is your clients. Did your clients already find product market fit? And so for us, that's something we really want to make sure before starting to work with them, because we've had many cases where sometimes you have a company that's on the last few thousands of euros on the bank account. They come to us and they hope that you're gonna save their business, right? It's, they haven't really found product market fit. They come, they're like, I don't know, they have 20K left on the bank account, they give you 10, and they're a bit like, come on, do magic, make it work, figure out product market fit for us. And that's usually the worst type of client, because first of all, they don't have a lot of money. So the little amount of money they've given you is going to be very important for them, which is going to make them like a very difficult to deal with. And also as an external provider, this is on the founder to figure out product market fit. It's not on an external agency to do. So now what we started to do is that if we start a conversation with our earlier stage company, we're going to be very upfront with them. If they're like pre-seed, seed stage, that you can tell that I haven't really found product market fit, we're going to pitch an offer to help them figure out that product market fit. But then we're not going to talk in amount of meetings, which is typically the metric you're looking at as an outbound agency, right? Oh, I'm going to get you 20 meetings per month, 30 meetings per month. If you work with like early stage companies, it's very important during the sales process to actually tell them to be like, you are so early that we cannot commit on a certain amount of meetings, but what we can do is run one campaign targeting a very specific ICP every week and keep iterating with you until you find one audience actually resonating with your product and offer. But I think it's very important to be upfront, because otherwise, if you set enormous expectations, you say, hey, we're going to deliver 30 meetings every month, and then you end up delivering one, then it's also like completely fair for the client to be a bit disappointed. So I think that's a mistake that a lot of young agencies are making, is that you make crazy claims during the sales process because you just want to sell a lot, and then you end up making the client very dissatisfied.
In the end, when you are an agency, like the amount of value that you provide, normally it's quite related to the amount of time that you invest in this client, unless you have a standardized product or whatever. So it's not as scalable as SaaS. So what tools or what processes are you doing internally with AI in order to guarantee that you can scale and not being limited with this human power?
Yeah, that's a much bigger discussion, and I think that's like my main bet on where the market is going. I think we're going to witness a bit of a revolution when it comes to agencies. I think if you look back the last 10, 15 years, SaaS was very trending. Everyone wanted to build a SaaS, and agencies were a bit kind of overlooked, being seen as like a very boring business model because it was like very difficult to scale. If you wanted to scale revenue, you had to hire a lot of people. And I think that AI reshuffled the cards a little bit. And so when I look at what we are building internally, now as an agency with all the tools available, if you look at like Lovable, N8N, you can actually do crazy stuff without having a full dev team, right? And so now over the last 6 months, we've built a lot of agentic internal processes that are really going to increase the amount of clients that one of our GTME can take. And so the whole SaaS, software as a service, I think is going to start to be flipped, and we're going to go into a world that's going to be more like service as a software. And so you're going to start seeing a lot of agencies building a lot of tech internally to be able to serve more clients and serve clients even better with less headcount. And so when I see it, like all the competing agencies, like we're all in good terms with one another, I think that's typically starting at a certain size, you see all those agencies starting to build internal tech. And so for us, if you look, for example, I can give you a very concrete example, like list building. 2 years ago, doing list building was extremely time consuming, right? It's like a very low added value task, but it's extremely time consuming. You need to go on like sales nav, you need to go on Apollo, tick like all your filters, like scrape the lists, you need to enrich it. This doesn't bring a lot of value. If you're a super talented GTME in your team, he has better shit to do than just going like click on some filters inside of Apollo. And so now we're building like agents to actually take care of that entire process. And so as an agency, we spend a lot of time looking at all the tasks that our service delivery team is spending time on. And then we start to figure out, okay, what are the tasks that can actually be automated and where can the GTME can actually provide the most value. And so everything that's like very repetitive and time consuming, that's usually the task we're looking in the first place. Same for like clients reporting. We spent the last 4 months building like a real dashboard, almost as a software. Clients are going to have a login, so they're going to have a very SaaS experience with cold IQ dashboards, like how you would connect to like HubSpot, and then being able to see the reporting directly inside of your dashboard. So I think that the whole SaaS world and the agency world is doomed to just merge in like one category. Like I think B2B companies won't care about, is it an agent delivering an outcome? Is it a SaaS delivering an outcome? Or is it an agency delivering an outcome? Companies want outcome. They don't really care how you deliver it. And so you're going to start to see a lot of merging between SaaS and agency, and people are just going to be like, I need that specific outcome, and I'm just going to find the best provider to deliver that specific outcome to me.
What is
Generally,
one?
are you,
Go.
sorry, Nacho, you heavily rely on Lovable and N8N to do these automations and to do these dashboards?
We started with this. I think like Lovable is an amazing way to prototype. And now we're actually also hiring like a real dev to actually build like more sturdy solutions. I think it's an amazing way to get started. If you want to test a new tool, you can already do a lot with Lovable and N8N, Superbase for a database. But I think once you want to start building something more sturdy that you want to deploy to like more clients, you at some point need to like custom build it. So right now we're also working with some like full-time dev who are actually building our Lovable prototype into like a real tech product.
Makes sense.
I was curious about, you mentioned that you guys have some workflows that you're running internally. Is there one that you could share publicly, explain how it works, or is that confidential?
I can explain how it works, but I wouldn't like making it like a duplicable for other people because we invested a
Sure.
lot of time. But for example, now what we can also do is based on an onboarding form, based on the ICP matrix, based on the onboarding call with the clients, we actually trained an agent to pre-select outbound play that we think would have the best results for that specific client. And so that's something that used to be like requiring a lot of GTM expertise to, based on all the information you have, figure out which outbound play to run. And so now we're starting to actually have an agent that's been trained on our best campaigns, our best workflows, and kind of pre-select pre-campaigns ideas that we think would have the highest chance of success for the client based on onboarding form, onboarding call, and ICP matrix.
Company that is generating around 2 million per year, what is the non-negotiable 3 tools that they should have in their GTM stack?
I would start with clothes. I think having just a cloud company account for us now, we build a lot of projects. We have one cloud project per client. It's just like an amazing way to have as an assistant train on all that data. Also for us, is if we have a GTME leaving the company or switching accounts, having that kind of like data store somewhere, all the calls, all the interaction we've ever had with the clients. It's really important to start like storing that data somewhere. Then I would say Clay. Clay is still the best tool for me to do data enrichments. Like I think Clay has like a really big and steep learning curve, but it's still the best tool for data orchestration. So even for us now, we have a lot of things automated with N8N, but Clay is still the central piece where if we need to find some specific data points, all that data enrichment work is still going to happen in Clay directly. So I would say clothes, Clay second, and then third, I would say N8N. As a business owner, I think no matter what you do, being able to build agents and automations around your business is just going to make your business much more efficient. I think we're going to enter an era where you're going to see like the most profitable businesses that have ever existed. Sam Altman is always talking about that idea that we might witness the birth of the one person unicorn. And I think that's because of tools like N8N, where you're going to have someone that's so competent at building systems around the company that you won't need like a team of hundreds of people to actually do a good job with your business. So clothes, Clay, N8N, I would say.
Within there's something that always goes around my head, and is in order, and please prove me wrong or correct me, in order to have someone to read your email, your LinkedIn DM, or whatever message that you send them. One is the obvious signal that you mentioned earlier, which is try to target someone that already recognizes you because you have been posting, because they have been engaging with you, and so on. But we're starting to see that everyone is using these enrichment tools in order to write these custom messages. And the more enriched it is, the more custom it is. But for most of these people receiving these messages, at least for me, and I've been doing this enrichment like every now and then for the past year. And it's no longer surprising to write an enriched message or something personalized, because they know these people they have already seen 20, 30 messages custom written to them based on a post that they wrote, or based on because they liked something or whatever. So it's no longer that special or resonating to write something custom. That's when Signals came in, and now there's a bunch of tools like Trigify that are actually selling this signals, send the right message at the right time based on whatever signals. But again, we might see the same now that these signals are accessible for everyone paying these tools. Then the end user is going to be, or the end client is going to be receiving some sort of the similar messages of, yes, because you raised a bunch of money now, I'm like offering you this special product because you now have the money to spend. But like me, there's going to be 20 other people sending these messages. And if it's people that they are all in your feed, what is the next step of having something that stands out versus the rest of 20, 30, 40 messages that you have in your DMs or in your email inbox?
Yeah, to answer this, I always go back to that one equation, which I think is like the most important when you do outbound, is that relevance is always going to be more important than personalization. I think over the last 2 years, everyone got very caught up in trying to write the most personalized emails out there. But personalization at the end of the day doesn't matter that much, right? If you pitch me like a product that's completely useless to me, I don't really care that you know the name of my dog and my address and with who I went to college with, right? It's like it became almost like a flex of like how personalized you could make an email. But at the end of the day, if the email is completely relevant to me, I won't care that much about the personalization. And the other way around is much more interesting. If I send you an email that's extremely relevant to you, but it's actually not personalized at all, there is a very high chance that you will answer. Like for me, I don't care if it's like a template that I receive and I can clearly tell that email was sent to multiple people. If at the end of the day, what's being presented in that email is relevant to me, I might be interested into what that person is offering. And so I always go back to the example, Twain, the tool for copywriting. So Mohammed, the CEO, 2.5 years ago at the beginning of Cold IQ, he was looking for a board of advisors to give him advice on the product. And so what he did is that he crafted a very simple email where he reached out to, I think, 25 different sales LinkedIn influencers and simply offered them to become advisor for a certain amount of money every month as a compensation. Like that email didn't even have the first name variable. So it was like, hi, comma, the pitch. He got 25 positive replies out of 25 emails sent. And so you can clearly see that like making the email relevant and interesting is going to get you much better results than having super personalized email. You can clearly see it with there because there was like zero personalization and a 100% positive reply rates on those emails.
Actually, that was a pretty solid answer to my question. I think it's about time to start to wrap it up. We always like to have a few last fire questions. The one that we always ask first is, what is one book that you would recommend to anyone?
Does it need to be about sales or life in general?
Whatever. One book to life in general.
For me, the book that started all is The 4 Hour Work Week from Tim Ferriss.
Okay, the classic one. Fair enough. Then let's make it fast. A fuck, marry, kill of AI sales tools. So one AI sales tool that you would play around with for an afternoon, another tool that you would that you would use for the rest of your life, and another one that you would kill, some tool that you would want to banish on Earth. What would that be?
Let's do Trigify, Clay, RB2B.
Which one are you killing?
I think RB2B because now you have a much better website, visitor identification tools. I think it started as an amazing idea, but now that product is actually just a feature from other products. If you look at what Lemlist, Warmly is doing, full website visitor identification started as an amazing idea, but now it's just one specific product feature, part of like bigger tech products. I would probably not buy RB2B specifically, and I would just get website visitor identification through another tool.
That makes sense. Danny, one last question. You said.
Yep. I think you said that you were 30 years old before entering the podcast. Okay. So imagine that tomorrow you wake up and you are 40 years old. So what's the best scenario that you can imagine in your life?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, it's like I try to always focus on 3 parts of the person I want to be. And so I strive to be a entrepreneur, creator, athlete. And so for me, I'm just trying to do one action daily that gets me closer to those 3 identities. And so if for the coming 10 years, I can do something to contribute to my business, something to contribute to my personal brands, and something to contribute to my athleticism, I think it was going to be a very successful decade.
I'm actually taking
When you
this
say
for
you are
me.
an athlete, what type of sport do you practice?
I'm training for high rocks at the moment. Half of the planets right now, but I'm doing a lot of weightlifting, and then I'm planning to do my first high rocks in 2026.
Challenging. It's a tough one. But yeah, sounds exciting. Alex, thank you so much for spending your precious time with us today. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Bye everyone. See you on the next episode.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a nice one, everyone.